Women Against Abuse is celebrating 50 years of service with Philly's best women chef competition, Dish It Up. It's happening on Thursday, June 11th at the Crystal Tea Room in Center City. This year, step into a groovy 1970s-inspired night featuring delicious bites from top local chefs, an open bar, and the chance to connect with hundreds of changemakers. Best of all, proceeds support survivors of domestic violence. Get your tickets at womenagainst.abuse.org. Inside SCI Muncie, Pennsylvania's largest women's state prison, those serving life or long-term sentences battle chronic illnesses like diabetes, arthritis, and hypertension at as young as 35 years old. But by 50, their health has declined. Their bodies are like people decades older. Prisons just aren't set up to support the medical care of an aging population. Dying on the Inside is a new 5-part podcast series that digs deep into what medical care, justice, and health disparities really look like for women behind bars. Today, I'm joined by executive producers Cherry Gregg and Yvonne Laddie. It's Monday, April 20th. I'm Trinina Ree, and here's a look at healthcare in Pennsylvania prisons. So as you know, we're in the thick of inviting new folks to join our CityCast Philly neighbor community. In fact, we only have a week left of our spring membership campaign. We've talked about some of the cool perks that come along with being a CityCast Philly neighbor, like exclusive podcast content and members-only events. But today, we want to linger on one of my favorite perks, and that's the neighborhood shout-outs. Does your dog walker literally go that extra mile? Does your coffee shop make even the earliest mornings a lot brighter? It's people and places like these who make Philly shine. CityCast Philly neighbors have the opportunity to submit them for a neighborhood shout-out. We want the show to shine a light on what makes the city so great. And as a CityCast Philly neighbor, you can help us do that. To become a CityCast Philly neighbor, go to membership.citycast.fm/Philly and sign up. That's membership.citycast.fm/Philly. And thanks. Cherry and Yvonne, it's great to see you both and speak to you again.
Nice to see you too, Trinae.
Thanks for having us.
Dying on the Inside is a new podcast series exploring an often forgotten population here in Pennsylvania, women serving life or long-term sentences. And you all really dug deep into what healthcare looks like for these women. And they are battling chronic illnesses, and they are also aging. I'm curious, what led you to these stories in the first place? Cherry.
Yeah, well, Trinae, I've been covering criminal justice reform for 15 years. And several years ago, I met some women who had spent time at SCI Muncie, and they were younger women. And they told me that the women that had mentored them while they were on the inside were sick and they were dying, and somebody needed to look into it. They didn't know why. They thought it was the water. They thought it was so many things. And they just sounded the alarm. And I had spoken to a few of the women a few years ago, and it just sort of haunted me. But then the pandemic hit. I left my job. I got married. Like, so many things happened in life that the story and our priorities just in society sort of shifted. But a couple of years ago, it just resurfaced. I found my notes. And every time I went to sleep, Trinae, I would see one of these women like in my dreams. And so I had been sort of like low-key admiring Yvonne Laddie from afar and just, you know, some of her work. And I didn't know how to do this story and to do it in a way that I thought would give justice to the women whose stories we would be telling. And so Yvonne and I went to coffee 2 years ago, and she was on board right away. And we just started this journey hand in hand. And it's really been a labor of love, a labor of justice, and compassion. That's what it's been, and empathy.
Yvonne, why now? Why are you telling these stories now?
You know, in Philadelphia, I can speak for Philadelphia because I was a reporter here in the 90s and I covered a lot of criminal cases, a lot of homicide cases. You know, I would go out into the neighborhood and interview sort of the victims' families, but then I would also go into the courtroom. And I'm telling you, it was a parade of death penalty that would get put down to life without parole. And it was all a lot of Black men and a lot of Black women and a lot of Latinos. And they were forgotten. And so when Cherry came to me with this story, it really brought me back to being a young reporter and just sort of listening to what the police said, never really asking deeper questions. All the stories were like a formula. And so now I feel like in this project, we're seeing what the cost was of that period of, you know, Lynn Abraham and Roger King and lock them up for life. And
You're talking about the former city's district attorney and top prosecutor at the time.
yeah, the city's district attorney at the time, Lynn Abraham, who was, you know, one tough cookie, tough on crime. And then now these people are aging in prison, you know, they're 50, 60, 70 years old. And they literally, their bodies are breaking down. And when you start looking at the cases, they're not even that compelling to give a person life in prison without parole. I mean, there's so many things wrong. And this is a tough story to tell right now because people don't really care. People care about gas prices, they care about their rents going up, the cost of housing, the cost of food.
I mean, rightfully so. I mean,
Yeah,
those
yeah,
things
they don't
are
care.
important.
They don't care about these women and these men that are basically just dying in jail. But I believe that their stories are important, and I believe that these stories tell us a lot about who we are as a society, as a city, as a state. And I believe that no one should be forgotten. And so I don't think it takes a
Absolutely.
lot. I don't think it takes a lot to really look at what's going on and then use the power of your vote and use the power of your voice to try to help people who really need help, to be honest.
And so, from what I'm hearing you saying, basically 30 years ago in the city, there were really punitive sentences given out to people of color, men and women. Would you say that the sentences that they were receiving back then, would someone today receive such a harsh sentence? And we'll talk about the women. What were women being locked up for?
And Yvonne and I both were very shocked to learn, Trinae, that, you know, women most of the time got locked up because they were addicted to drugs and they were in bad relationships, sometimes abusive relationships. Many of the women that we interviewed and what we found across the country is that many women have been had sexual abuse from very young ages and just grew into people who were just caught up in things that if they had had earlier supports, they may not have been caught up in. And we have so many women who are incarcerated who are doing life in prison who did not, in fact, take a life. So I want you to just sort of understand that when you get mandatory life without parole, that means you are sentenced to death by incarceration. And if you are given the death penalty, you get to appeal, you get all these resources, you get to go back and get additional bites at the apple. But when you get mandatory life without parole, there is none of that. So many of these women, and you'll hear some of their stories in the podcast, they have been sentenced to mandatory life without parole. They were in a bad relationship. They were addicted to drugs. They did not take a life. And in some cases, the man or the person they were with who actually did take the life are now free. And it almost feels like you're like, what? And people are very shocked when they hear that.
Yeah.
But when you're a Black woman or a woman of color and that you are locked up for life and people throw away the key, they don't want to hear from you anymore. You know, they're done with you. And being a woman, there are additional, there's an additional stigma to being a woman who committed a crime such that she was sentenced to life, especially a mother who was sentenced to life. And a lot of these women are mothers.
Okay. Looking at criminal justice now, and Cherry, you are an attorney as well. Um, we've seen in recent years where the current district attorney, Larry Krasner, has taken an active stance on getting people who are wrongfully convicted out of prison. Is there a movement happening in the city where people are speaking up for these incarcerated women, or is that just not happening?
I'd say there is a lot of nonprofits and the Abolitionist Law Center and the ACLU that are, fighting for these women and trying to get their stories out there in a sense. But honestly, when it comes to mass incarceration, the stories that are told are the stories of men. So if you want to talk about aging lifers, you can find material about men who are aging. And women have a lot more complex issues when it comes to aging. And that's one of the things that I found really distressing is when we were doing the research, like how much material I was able to find about men and how little I was able to find about women. And even Muncie, SCI Muncie, it took us about 3 hours to get there, while SCI Chester is only like a half an hour away.
And Chester houses men.
Men.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the men's prison. Yeah, so it's even difficult for these women to get visitors. They just feel really forgotten, and I just want to say they're in. I mean, these women did do something wrong. It's not like the women we interviewed are innocent. It's just like the Innocence Project. The women we interviewed did something wrong. They have been in prison for over 30 years. In one case, one woman has been there for 47 years. They have done nothing in their time but try to work on themselves. I mean, these women are constantly in group and in therapy and working on all the things that have been wrong in their lives. And I just don't know, like, when is it enough? Like, when is it enough? I mean, and that's probably the question I'm wrestling with the most as someone who has sat down with a lot of families who have lost someone through homicide. When is it enough? When is it enough punishment? When are you no longer a threat to society?
In the podcast, you all talk about poor diet, lack of exercise, and inadequate medical care being some of the key factors impacting their declining health. Help me to understand the scope of this. What did you see? What have you heard?
So you got to understand, there are many factors that create a phenomenon that we found to be called accelerated aging. So studies show that for every year of incarceration, you lose about 2 years of life expectancy. And the reason that happens is because the diet. They don't get fresh foods. Most of the food, and Yvonne and our team, we went to Muncie and we were able to go into the kitchen. They were mostly canned food, boxed food, nothing fresh. I mean, you really take salads. We take salads for granted. There is a black market for vegetables that happens inside of the prison just so people can have an onion or a green pepper or something like that.
What?
Yes, and it's really serious. In addition to that, just the fact that you are incarcerated is very stressful. You don't have access to vitamin D, being out in the sunlight. And because you're not getting adequate nutrition over time, and we find that people who tend to spend more than 10 years in prison, it is exacerbated because if you think about it, if you don't have access to sunlight on a regular basis, you don't have access to healthy foods, you don't have access to vitamins, right? Because we just go to the store, we pop vitamins every single day. They have to advocate inside of prison for vitamins. And the other thing we found is that there is a disparity between people who have been sentenced for long terms versus short term. So if you're given a life sentence, many of the women said when they see life on your paperwork, they move a little bit slower, right? If you have an issue with healthcare, they know that you're not going nowhere. They know that the likelihood that there will be a lawsuit is less versus if somebody got 5 years or 7 years, right? They'll move a little bit faster for them because they're likely to be out and are more likely to have people checking for them and calling for them and are more likely to get out and be able to attribute any of their illnesses to prison. And so there is that disparity as well. And then just the fact of being a woman. I mean, women have different health challenges than men, and prisons were not built for female bodies, and so you're the clothing that they get, even the beds that they sleep in, and just so many things are built for men. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be because, majority of the people who are incarcerated are male, but they don't make any differentials for the fact that there is a population of women.
Yvonne, tell me a story of a woman that you spoke with for the podcast, just briefly. How has her chronic illness impacted her life behind bars?
Man, there's so many. It's almost hard to choose one, but the woman who we feature in our first episode, Sylvia Boykin, she's always in my mind. She's a mother of three. She was arrested and charged with second-degree murder because she was in the room when a murder happened. Her health is extremely bad. She's 67 years old. She's been there for over 34 years. You name it, like the illnesses they were telling us about, like I never even heard of. I mean, it was literally a laundry list. It's the knees are bad, the hips are bad, the back is bad. They have diabetes, they have sciatica. Sylvia's in a wheelchair. And the man she was with who committed the murder, he got out in 6 years because his lawyer had dementia. She's been in there 34 years, and she was, she was high at the time it happened. The other thing we're seeing a lot with these women is just what a horror crack was. What a horror crack was in their lives. She's very religious. She's a leader in the church. She's always in the church. She's been in the church since the first day she got there. But right now, her health is very, very bad. And the only job she can have in the prison is wiping tables because she has to wheel herself to the tables to wipe them. If she finds that things get turned yet another corner for her, she'll wind up living in the infirmary, which is where a lot of the older women live. It's it's a cell with no windows. And they just lie there until they die, basically. But Sylvia's a very special person. She's very smart. She's very, very, very sorry. Like she's so sorry for being in the room, for what she did to her children. But everything in her body is breaking down. And it's a lot. I mean, to be honest, it's a lot. And it really tugs at you because you do know that they did something bad. We're not saying that, I'm not saying there should be no prisons. I'm not even going to that conversation about what mass incarceration should look like. But I think what the podcast shows us through reporting is that there's something very, very wrong here. And it's costing taxpayers a lot of money to keep Sylvia on all her medications and keep her alive in this condition.
I had to pause for a second because it's heavy.
It is.
How did you all manage just the challenges of reporting? You are speaking to women that look like us, women who once walk the same blocks we walk on, and mothers and grandmothers. How did you sort of protect your mental health in this reporting?
Yvonne and I talk about this a lot because it is very heavy. And Trinae, even when I told you about how the story came to me, I mean, I literally have been haunted. And I have a belief, it's like built into my DNA that, there's a reason why certain people get these positions, right? And that you have an obligation to highlight, if you can, the voices that rarely get heard. And these are voices, these women who are serving life in prison, you rarely, if ever, hear from them. Not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. And the disparities are very stark. I mean, disproportionately, Black women and women of color got harsher sentences. And so for me, it is haunting. It is stressful. But I think it's like a labor of love. We are compelled to do this. I'm a woman of faith. I pray on this. I pray on this every single day. Yvonne and I, like we've said, it's heavy. Like she's had some nightmares herself.
Yeah. Yeah, it can make me cry thinking about it. But I do want to add one thing. It's like it's
Are you
been
wiping
really
tears
helpful
right now?
I'm wiping tears, but I do want to say
Yeah.
that it's been really incredibly helpful to
They
work
are
with Cherry on
wonderful.
this
Yeah.
because Cherry, like not being alone, like we know what it's like to talk to those women. We know what it's like to go to Muncie. It's been very traumatic to cover, and you kind of feel a little guilty for what you have. But I think, like, as a Black woman, and also as having a mother who is from the Dominican Republic, that it's
Yeah.
really, really important for people like Cherry and I to tell these stories because we're so lucky that we didn't have mothers that threw us to the wolves like a lot of these women had. So, but I'm a big believer in mental health when it comes to reporting. And so you have to
Yeah.
try to find joy in your life and lean on that, lean on family, on friends, on love, watch bad TV. I always say, it was difficult, but I think if you listen to the podcast, it makes you feel like not only that you're learning something you maybe didn't know, but you it feels sort of weirdly empowering, like knowledge is power. And
Yeah.
it also feels really good to know the truth.
We've got more on this story after the break. Everything feels more expensive right now, but one of Philly's best resources is still completely free. With a free Library of Philadelphia card, you get access to thousands of programs, events, and digital resources for all ages. Whether you're looking for something fun to do, hoping to build new skills, or simply want a welcoming place to spend time, the library is here for you. Your library card also opens the doors to a vast digital collection, including ebooks, audiobooks, learning languages, genealogy, and news. At its core, the library is where access meets opportunity. It's a place to explore new interests, gain practical skills, and connect with your community. And don't worry, they don't have those fees if you return your materials late. And anyone who lives, studies, or works in Philadelphia, or is a Pennsylvania resident, can get a library card. Sign up today, freelibrary.org/card, and see what's waiting for you. Life gets busy, and it's easy for fitness and well-being to just fall off. But City Fitness feels like a place that actually fits into your routine instead of disrupting it. City Fitness isn't just a gym. It's where people in Philly build a routine and feel a part of a real community. Classes are a big part of it. There's high-energy stuff like HIIT, strength, cardio, plus slower formats like yoga and Pilates, cycling classes too. So you can mix it up depending on your mood. And if you want more structure, they also have personal training, real coaches who build a plan around your goals. You can try it with a complimentary day pass, So no pressure, just go hang with the community and see if it fits your life. They've got multiple locations around the city: Fairmount, Fishtown, Passyunk, No Libs, and others. So there's probably one near you. Go to cityfitness.com, grab a complimentary day pass, and meet some people and see if it fits your routine and goals. Let's get back into some of the details of what is currently happening. I did see that according to the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, the average age of an incarcerated woman is 41.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the average age. And what's so interesting is, as of 2030, 1 in 3 incarcerated individuals across the country will be over age 50. And so you see that we've seen the number of people who are incarcerated go down, but the cost of incarceration has gone up. And part of that is because you have so many people who are getting older. They have, more expensive medical needs. And it can cost up to $120,000 a year to incarcerate something. So one person, if they got cancer, think about it. They got to get chemo. They have chronic illnesses. They need expensive medications. So we're not just talking about, even if you're like, a person who doesn't necessarily, you believe people who did something bad should be locked up forever. It could cost up to $120,000 a year to incarcerate one person. And this person may not be, and very unlikely to be, a danger to society because they can't even walk unassisted.
Okay, but is there like any state in this country that is trying to do this better, trying to do health care or wellness or even mental health better for those who are incarcerated?
There are states. California passed a geriatric parole bill where after you serve a certain amount of time, you get an opportunity to go up to for parole. So after like 25 years or a certain number of years, you can at least get access to parole. You don't automatically get out, but if you serve a certain number of years, they take medical condition, they take the work that you've done while you've been incarcerated into consideration. Also, I think one thing people don't realize in many states, and Pennsylvania is an outlier because we have the third largest number of people serving life sentences in the country, behind California and Florida. So we're a very carceral state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But in many states, a life sentence is 20 or 25 years. And so in Pennsylvania, though, people were getting mandatory life without parole. So a life sentence meant you were never getting out. You were going to die in prison. And so I think a lot of states, just even if you deal with that, there are easier pathways to getting out, even if you don't even fix some of the other broken parts like nutrition, like exercise, like the mental health. And as you spend more and more money on chronic illness, there's less and less money to spend on other parts of incarceration, like the food, like the mental health, et cetera, et cetera.
Cherry, I know that earlier in this episode, you talked about just how difficult getting some sort of justice if you have lifer on your record. But is there any form of hope for the women that are featured in this podcast?
Yes, actually, just at the end of March, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life without parole is unconstitutional in second-degree murder cases. They said that it would be cruel and unusual punishment to condemn someone to death by incarceration in cases where they did not take a life. And so this could open the door for resentencing for hundreds of people in Pennsylvania who are serving mandatory life without parole for second-degree murder, including some of the women that we interviewed. And depending upon how fast the legislature acts, they could get a shot at parole. And it's not an open door, by the way. It just means that they could get their sentence reduced and possibly be eligible for parole and go and make their case. And because of the changes that these women have made on themselves, because of the work that they've done, I think a lot of them have a really good chance of seeing freedom.
I want to go back to just sort of maybe like the difference in how we speak about justice or justice reform. There's something called Act 47. It's known as the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Bill. And
Mm-hmm.
it includes protections around pregnancy, birthing, and postpartum care for women who are behind bars. Um, is there sort of a movement in Harrisburg currently looking to address the medical needs and the care of the aging population among women in our state prisons? Are there any Philly or Pennsylvania lawmakers who are taking on this issue?
There actually are. I'll point out that this is not just limited to women. This is an effort, I think, to deal with people who are aging generally. But Rick Krajewski is a state lawmaker who has been pushing, an amendment to the compassionate release law that currently exists in Pennsylvania. It would expand. First of all, let me level set and just say under the compassionate release law in Pennsylvania, you have to get a doctor to certify that you have less than a year to live and that you have a terminal illness and that you are dying. And then you have to, if you want to get out, you have to agree that you will not seek any care that would extend your life. And so you
What?
basically, in order to get out on compassionate release, you have to agree to die. And most people, they want to live, they want to get better treatment. They may have stage 4 cancer, for example, but it's a hard thing to say you will refuse all treatment. And so Rick Krajewski is pushing a law that actually passed the House and is now in the Pennsylvania Senate that would change the law and would allow people medical release if they have a debilitating illness and they don't have to then agree to basically die. And part of what we tell in the podcast is the story of women who used this law to get out and basically died. We also mentioned the fact that there are many women who die, and men who die trying to get compassionate release because it is a very slow process as it currently stands. But under the medical release bill, it would force prisons and the system to act faster so that people can get out.
And I just want to add, the kicker is if you live longer than you're supposed to, they can put you back
Oh
in.
yeah,
They can
that
put you
part.
back in jail,
Oh, geez.
in prison, not jail,
This is
prison.
this doesn't make sense.
No, none of it makes sense. That's what's so interesting about this podcast and about this entire journey we've been on. None of it makes any sense. It truly is cruel and unusual punishment. It's cruel. It's just cruel.
And when people hear about it, Trinae, your reaction is not unusual.
Yeah, my eyebrows are up, my face is scrunched because it's like speechless, honestly. I wanted to also ask you both if you had conversations with victim families or victim rights groups, because I feel like sometimes there's like kind of a battle here when it comes to criminal justice and like the rights of those who were hurt and the families who were hurt because of some type of crime. What's their take on these conversations on justice reform and healthcare?
I did speak to a couple of victims who had also experienced, though, in addition to experience the loss of people that they love at the hands of folks who are currently serving life, but they've also either been incarcerated or had someone they love take a life, right? And end up incarcerated. And so they've experienced both sides. And they said that their feelings evolved, that initially, they were angry Initially, they wanted that person to be locked up forever. But as time went on, their feelings about the incarcerated person softened, especially if they saw the person doing the things that they needed to transform their own individual life. And one of the victims I spoke to, Movita Johnson Harrell, who a lot of people know, she lost two of her sons to gun violence. She lost her father to gun violence. She lost her brother to gun violence. And she talked about, wrestling with these types of emotions. And the other victim that I spoke to, her name is Christine. And she talked about the fact that, look, a lot of these individuals who took lives did not have the support, did not have love. And she understood both sides of it. So, but she doesn't at the same time, feel any kind of way about victims who do not feel the way she feels. Because there's a lot of people who are still struggling and they haven't evolved to a place where they're willing to forgive. But the victims that I spoke to said that they were, but it did take time.
So what does justice look like for the women who are featured in your podcast? Healthier food options, more wellness classes, more medical staff, upgrades to prison facilities, advocacy pushes in Harrisburg or in our courts. How long would it take for Pennsylvania to get this right? And what could justice look like?
I mean, I think for the women that we spoke to, they want to go home. I mean, that's the bottom line. They really want to go home. They feel like they're sorry and like they feel like they've done the work. They're so sorry for what they've done, and they have so much regret. And they've also know how they've hurt their own children by their actions. I mean, there's a lot of sorrow of what, their children who had to grow up without a parent because they were incarcerated. I think things in the meantime, because that's not easy, that could help would be something as small as better food options so they don't have to go on the black market. Better health care. Not having them have to pay when you only make 52 cents an hour for your medication.
Or 19.
Yeah, that's on the high end is 52 cents an hour. Excuse me. It's low end is 19 cents. To just make things a little bit more bearable for them while they're there. But I think for them, I think they want to come home. I mean, there's a lot, with second-degree murder, having a chance to be revisited. These are all opportunities, but at the same time, what we learned in our reporting is it's still going to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So while they're there, how can we be a little bit more humane to them, to a 67-year-old great-grandmother who has everything broken,
Dying on the Inside, Women Lifers at Muncie Prison releases this week on Wednesday, April 22nd, wherever you listen to podcasts. Cherry Gregg, Yvonne Laddie, thank you both so much for sharing these stories and sharing this space with me here on CityCast Philly today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cherry and Yvonne are hosting a live launch event at WHYY on Wednesday, April 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m., featuring a listening experience and a panel discussion with justice-impacted voices, advocates, and policymakers. We'll have a link to that event in our show notes. Thank you to our CityCast Philly neighbors who make conversations like this one possible. A big shout out to our newest neighbors, Amanda M. and Izzy M. Welcome to the neighborhood, y'all. You'll be getting those orange pennants in the mail soon. Let us know where you hang those up. You also get ad-free listening, a weekly curated list of events, a neighbors-only podcast segment on Fridays, and members-only events. Speaking of those, we just announced today that our next Neighbors event will be happening in May. We're going to be cheering runners and passing out water at the Broad Street Run. You can join at membership.citycast.fm/Philly. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode on Pennsylvania's aging prison population. Also, share this with a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter to learn more about what else Philly is talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.